Okay, this is my third video, which is about blending the two halves of the sear together. So the last video I connected the two sears. Now I'm in the process of blending. Now keep in mind that this process takes 3, 4, 5 days. It's really important that you take time with this, put it in a plastic bag, and you let the moisture content between the two half spheres balance, so that the moisture is equal on both sides. Some people, they'll connect the two sears and they'll tool them and everything's fine. And then they start carving on them and doing whatever they're going to do, and they end up with cracking. Now, one thing that's critical about this is that you want the sphere to be closed off, no holes in it, so that the interior air pressure, as it's drying and it's shrinking, that interior air pressure is pushing out. And then when you're blending it with your rib tool, and I have this round tool, type of a rib tool that I use, as you're blending it, it helps compress the platelets of the clay. So it's important to take the time and allow the moisture content to balance. Now this sear, when I started, was a little bit drier than they normally are. And I actually added water to it, to the plastic bag, because I wanted it to be a little bit wetter than what it was. So, you can play it either way. But I wanted to talk about that. Now, keep in mind that eventually you do need to poke a hole in the sear, because if you allow it to compress on its side itself, eventually, by not poking a hole, that interior air pressure is going to push out and cause cracking on the exterior, and then you've got a problem that you're not going to want. So I tell you, unless you do this, like I do this all the time, so I have a sense of when to poke a hole, but every once in a blue moon I have one that cracks on the face. So I wanted to explain this process. So basically for 4 or 5 days I take it out of the bag, I use the rib tool on it, I use a ring tool on it, and this ring tool has a sharper edge, which actually helps to take clay and move clay around a little bit more. This ring tool has a sharp edge, but it has a smooth edge that's rounded, so it just helps to mold it in a finer tuned kind of fashion. So the ring tools are more toward the end, but for every day that I'm allowing the moisture content to balance and I'm allowing the interior, I'm using these rib tools and I'm using these tools to compress the face of the clay so that I don't get cracking later on. And by doing that, rarely do you ever see where my connection point was on a sear, because the two halves have melded together. So that was basically it. I do have 2 videos that I'm going to attach to this video, showing how I'm blending it. Basically, it's taking it off from when I just connected it, and it's just really rough looking, so I'm blending it there. And then another video where I'm using my ring tools. And so I hope that explains it a little bit better. I mean, this is could be considered the boring part, but it's super critical to the end result that I believe that you get. And so there you go. So this is a little bit drier than I like it to be. So what I'll do in place of that is, when I put it in the bag, I'll make sure that I'm putting moisture in it regularly. So now I just take a rib tool and I start working that connection and compressing. So I normally spend a few days before I start carving on a piece. I want to make sure it's good and secured together. And I also like the as it dries, the interior air pressure is pushing out, which helps compress the face and the platelets of the clay into each other, which helps prevent cracking. Now I have a tool that's a little bit round. So part of the way I run this tool is much like the way, so I'm a bricklayer, but when I got out of high school, I started off in concrete. And much of the way I hold this tool, the angles that I use this tool are much like a cement finisher. You know, when I have a low spot, you know, I kind of go flatter with it. When I have a high spot, I'm angled up so that I'm bringing that high spot down, and then I just take and drop the, see, like I have this right here. I see a low spot, I drop it in. I have this ring-shaped cap. I can't even remember where I purchased it at. Something from Home Depot. But basically, I want the whole circumference of this to sit on the face of the sphere. And once it has the ability to do that, I know I have a extremely round sphere. So I can do it partly by looking at it, like I can see a little bit of light right there. And you can kind of see in the areas of where it skips over. So right now it seems to be touching the whole face of the sphere. So I'll just do this and move the sphere around. So I know I have a low spot here because the ring isn't touching it. So I just apply a little bit of pressure. Right now, I see a section that doesn't feel as round as I'd like it to be. But I don't really want to remove any clay anymore. So I'm going to use this one, which is less about removing clay and more about compacting and just slightly shaping. And the reason why is this is a rounded edge, it's a soft edge. That one is a sharp edge. Okay, and then I want to get all these tailings. And that's where I just use my fingers. Now remember, you got to poke a hole in it sometimes as it's drying, because otherwise it's going to crack, and then you're going to have a problem healing that crack in a way that would be sufficient so that it doesn't cause problems later. Not that it can't be done, but it's just easier to stay ahead of the game by poking the hole. So all I'm doing with my finger now is just relieving those wakes of clay that happen from using a tool. So I like how round it is. I'm real pleased with it. So now I'm going to poke a hole in it. Maybe turn my little fan. I have a little fan right here. I'll turn it off. Maybe you'll hear it go psh. Maybe not. Nope.